Like, I'll just say it the way it is. A lot of people might not like this. That's why I'm gonna do it. The amount of like LGBT people that very openly and just brazenly advocate for and celebrate violence against people that don't acknowledge their lifestyle as being legitimate needs to be zero. The amount of people that should be doing that on social media, the goal number of that should be zero. And right now it's socially tolerated in a way that I think is completely unacceptable.
When a shooting happens and say which side the shooter was on is a fucking arsler. Read their comments, the manifesto. They're not right or left wing. They're insane. These people transcend politics and operate in the realms of psychosis. Are you gonna delete the video from yesterday that you put up on your main channel? It's the most unbelievably horrifying thing possibly imaginable. And the right wasted no time after a mass shooting that unfortunately took the lives of several children to begin demonizing trans people, which is not surprising. They're going to continue to do this because they can very effectively weaponize all of their hatred against trans people in such a way where they don't have to even get the story right. They don't even have to wait for facts. It can literally be the day of, and as soon as a photo comes out of someone who happens to have, say, long hair or something like that, and there's a mass shooting, they immediately like, oh my god, the person was trans, let's go after them. And in this case, this happens to be a situation where the shooter was a trans person. We'll go into some of those details in a couple seconds, but that had nothing to do with the shooting itself. Why you would want to mention that? Because I've never once, the vast majority of shooters, without question, are cis men. The overwhelming majority of them. When there's a mass shooting every other day in America, or sorry, every day in America now, you never hear this call to arms where it's just like another shooter, another man, another cis man. At this point, we need to have a serious discussion about the violence that cis men are enacting upon society. It's out of control. And if you were someone who actually looked at the numbers and wanted to base that on those numbers, that's how you would respond to this. But because there has been, out of the almost 3,000 mass shooters in a certain period of time, a couple of them, I believe 4 of them, have been trans, that's enough for them to be like, well, there's a pattern here. There is a pattern here. A pattern of any single time there's a horrifying tragedy, the worst people in the world use it as an opportunity to try and enact more violence on LGBTQ plus people. That's what's happening. And that's so fucked up, because none of this is about protecting kids. None of this is about keeping people safe. None about this is actually about trying to be like, how can we reduce the amount of times that these kind of tragedies happen? Because a very, very quick thing you could point towards is look towards other countries, say a country directly beside yours like Canada, and realize that if you account for the amount of people in our population versus yours, you have a grotesquely higher amount of mass shootings than we do. What accounts for that? I did American culture, violence, stuff like that. No, it's our gun laws. That's it. To be able to own a firearm in Canada, you have to have a gun license. To be able to obtain that gun license, you have to take a course on gun safety. And then you also have to do a background check, as well as the fact that if you have an ex or an ex-spouse or an ex-partner, they have to sign off on this, because there is a very high percentage of people who use weapons to attack their ex-partners. So that's one of the provisions that's put into it. It's at that point that you have the ability to purchase a gun. In the same way that if you were going to drive a car, because a car, yes, could be used to murder people, you have to get a license to drive the car. It's not a super controversial thing. And that's something that you can point towards. There are 2 countries with very similar cultures, very similar people, very similar media. I mean, mainstream media in America basically is just mainstream media in Canada. They get the same stuff bombarded to them constantly. I can tell you that from just turning on the TV here. You will see nonstop American news, American culture, American everything. But that is a massive difference. As soon as you cross that imaginary line into Canada, that suddenly the amount of mass shootings drop dramatically. There's a huge reason why. And doing this, all this does is make society more dangerous, because there's a lot of people who are going to be really, really sad, really upset when they hear that there was a mass shooting in which kids were killed. And then if you put into headlines, this was happening because of a trans person, well then where are they going to direct their anger? Towards yet another vulnerable community of people who are already being attacked, who are already trying to be legislated out of existence by an authoritarian far-right regime. So this is grotesque. And it's not surprising. It's unfortunately just the way that a lot of these fucking right-wing news outlets and pundits operate, but it's still fucking disgusting. Demonic. Transgender maniac shoots up Catholic school morning mass, killing 2 kids. Jesse Waters used one of the biggest platforms in all of television to call out the disturbing regularity of trans violence. Statistically, the trans population has been prone to violence. The trans clan has a militant wing, and it's out for blood. They are taking lives, defiling churches, and freaking everybody out. This is just not true. This is not based on reality. This is hate and bigotry that will lead to violence, yes, towards trans people.
Transgender who hates Trump's Christians and Jews shoots up kids at a Catholic school, and the media wants to take away your handgun. So how are we supposed to protect ourselves from trans shooters? The media is bad at pattern recognition. We aren't. Just 2 years ago, another trans 20-something walked into a Christian school in Nashville with a rifle and shot 3 kids and 3 adults.
So this is what's known as confirmation bias, as well as cherry-picking data. Because again, I'm sure everyone at this point has seen that multiple accounts, including, stochastic terrorist, check, Minnesota church shooting was trans, Republican Party firebombing, gender fluid, Nashville shooter, trans, Colorado Tesla arsonist, trans, Colorado Springs shooter, non-binary, Aberdeen shooter, trans, Denver school shooter, trans, Iowa school shooter, trans, gender fluid, AMC stabber, trans. Are you starting to see a pattern here? It's an epidemic. Trans people commit 0.11% of mass shootings and are 0.8% of the population. Cis men commit 98% of mass shootings and are 50% of the population. And at least one of those 98% of the mass shooters was inspired by libs of TikTok. Who's really the epidemic? This also from 2018 to 2023. Shootings with 4 or more victims killed or injured based on statistics. Cis people and majority cis men, 2,826. Trans people, 3. Which now it would be trans people, 4. But data doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. They are not concerned with that. They are concerned with immediately utilizing a horrifying tragedy, politicizing it for their political gains. And that's the really fucked up thing about this is the political side of the aisle that will condemn liberals or Democrats for ever having the audacity to speak about gun laws, for being like, I mean, this is pretty clear. Every other nation, if we were to look at comparable nations for either, GDP, population, culture, etc., when you begin to correct for the amount of people and the population itself, America is out of control when it comes to mass shootings. The biggest difference between them and, say, European countries or Canada, etc., is their gun laws and the amount of gun ownership and the proliferation of very deadly weapons that are not available for the public to purchase in those countries. This is not me saying, I'm here to take away your guns, right? But if you were to look at this kind of data, the actual data, and you saw something like this, I mean, if you were going to operate in the same way that the right operates, then guess what you would have to propose here? Here's my proposal. I have a proposal based on the data that you see before you. How about this? You have total freedom to purchase guns, but men are no longer allowed to buy them, or own them, or possess them. Only women. Men are the majority of people who use guns for violence. Men are the majority of people who organize and start wars. Men are the majority of people who also organize and facilitate things like genocide. And so for a long time, that's just been the way. So at this point, why don't we try something new? Men are no longer allowed to buy guns, own guns, or possess guns. But women can buy as many as they fucking want. And guess what? I know for some of the insecure men out there, right? Your people who follow pedophile rapists like Andrew Tate or Donald Trump, you're going to be like, but what? Well, hey, guess what? Here's the benefit to you and the whole manosphere and men's rights movement. You don't have to be worried about the responsibility of being a protector anymore, okay? Because the tables have turned. So now, when there's a situation where you're in your home and you're like, oh, I can't open this jar of beets or pickled eggs, then along can come a woman who owns a gun and she'll smash it for you right in front of you. And then you'll have access to all those delicious beets or pickled eggs that you wanted to open. Because again, the tables have turned. You're not responsible for that anymore. And you don't have to be. You don't have to be protectors. When there's a situation where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do here, but I mean, my manliness calls upon me to save the situation. You actually get a pass from here on out. It's up to the women to save you. All right, so you can just sit back because it's going to dramatically reduce the amount of violent assaults, dramatically reduce the amount of violence, dramatically reduce the amount of shootings, first and second degree murders, everything. All of it is just going to plummet down to barely anything. Society is going to be ideal after this. So that's the new proposal. All right, men are no longer allowed to own guns at all. They're not allowed to touch them. Only women are allowed to do with whatever they want with them, all right? And then, you know, if they start causing more violence or they start doing horrifying things, you can then look down upon them and be like, ladies, you're out of control, you know? I don't know what it is, but they are certainly causing a lot of terrible and violent acts in the world, so.
Again, holy fucking shit, man. Is this something that this person posted? I do think that, like, because this is the like you see this kind of stuff a lot on Twitter. We need to start banning and deplatforming these people that post this stuff. Like, at what point is it obvious that these very clearly and very obviously deranged animals destroy highest such as life? Like, what is this? Burn Israel.
I'm just going to turn this off if he's about to show everything on there, because there was slurs and there was also, you know, horrifyingly anti-Semitic statements.
Not looking good.
Guns.
Yep, not looking good at all. Kill Trump now. Oh boy. 6 million wasn't enough.
He was one of them.
So we have a Jew hater, Donald Trump hater, Christian hater. Yep. Wow. I don't even know what to say. Another trans shooter is becoming a big problem. I mean, I again, like, I will say 100%, it does look really, really bad. And I think the issue is that there are a lot of, like, I'll just say it the way it is. A lot of people might not like this. That's why I'm going to do it. The amount of, like, LGBT people that very openly and just brazenly advocate for and celebrate violence against people that don't acknowledge their lifestyle as being legitimate needs to be zero. The amount of people that should be doing that on social media, the goal number of that should be zero. And right now it's socially tolerated in a way that I think is completely unacceptable.
I love how he had to ramp up first by being like, hey, I'm just going to say something kind of brave and controversial just so you all know this. This is a guy who has been vilifying tons of different groups for a long time, including right now he's ramping up a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment. He's been pushing far-right narratives. He has actually made one of his World of Warcraft characters named after Anders Breivik. We're talking about a neo-Nazi mass shooter. So, guess what, Asmongold? In this case, this happens to be someone who, just like Anders Breivik, was someone who praised Hitler. This was someone who, like Anders Breivik, hated Jewish people, who was anti-Semitic, who was racist. In fact, if there is a correlation that we can find between a lot of these mass shooters, it is oftentimes going to be someone who is inspired by other mass shooters, as this mass shooter was, someone who is most likely racist and espouses white supremacist views, as this mass shooter was. I mean, there is a through line here. There is a problem that is going on. And a lot of it goes back down to far-right radicalization and the downplaying of that far-right radicalization. People like Asmongold might not think that when he's doing segment after segment where he's just basically being like, trans people are the problem. We need to eliminate trans people from the LGB. I know I'm not a part of either of those groups, but I still say LGB plus people, if you want to be taken seriously, you got to get rid of trans people. Trans people need... You are advocating for things that were the exact same shit that the Nazis were advocating for, by the way, which is, again, the elimination of trans people, the extermination of trans people, that kind of stuff. That's Nazi shit. Again, when there's a mass shooter who's also doing Nazi shit, you want to start to say, like, well, it's really hard to know. I think this person was doing a shooting because they were trans. Were they? because of all the shit I've seen so far, from the manifestos, from the stuff that was written on the guns, from the, you know, friends of the shooter or associates of the shooter or people who knew the shooter. There has been not a single statement that says this shooter did a mass shooting because this shooter was trying to kill cis people. That's the only reason why you would try to invoke this person's gender identity. Otherwise, what's the point unless you hate trans people? What's the point unless you want to vilify trans people? What's the point unless you want more people to commit violence towards trans people? There was nothing written on the guns that was like cis genocide. Every living cis is a fucking, should be a dead cis. Can't wait to gas all the cis. Stuff like that. There was nothing. Because again, that would be a reason to be like, well, I think that this person being trans and this person's gender identity certainly played a role in their radicalization. How so? How so? In what way were they trying to enact violence upon people who were not trans? Can you provide the evidence, please? Can you talk about that? Because otherwise, all you're doing is taking an incredibly vulnerable group that right now is having a very, very hard time, especially in America, that is already being targeted through legislation for extermination, I might add, and then adding more fuel to that fire, more hatred and bigotry towards that group. That is fucked, and that is what he does this on a regular fucking basis. There's no corrections the next day, by the way. This is the other really fucked up thing about all these ghouls dropping this kind of stuff, because the stories come out, surprise, surprise, it turns out that there's more information that no one was willing to look into. The petition added that the shooter identified as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification. But 5 years later, they seem to have backed away from that identity. I don't want to dress girly all the time, but I guess sometimes I really like it. I know I am not a woman, but I definitely don't feel like a man, they wrote. This is something that I haven't seen a single right-winger talk about, but it's appearing in multiple articles. This individual may have stopped identifying as trans, may have detransitioned, or may not have even been trans in the first place, but didn't recognize that until much later. And it was later in their life, and I'm using they, them pronouns because we're not entirely sure. They have taken their own life after committing this horrifying tragedy. But that's one of those things where, does this not play into your narrative? Did you not want to tell the full story? If this person realized that they were not trans all along, or this person realized that they identified at one point as being trans or wanted a different name, etc., but then realized after the fact that that was actually the wrong choice for them, which is a fair thing for anybody to make, by the way, well, then that's also important to your narrative because this is such a crucial part of your story. Oh, I gotta tell everyone, this person was a trans person and that's why they committed this vile act of violence. Trans violence is out of control. Look at the stats. What, 3 people? 3 mass shooters in U.S. history? There's probably gonna be 3 mass shooters in the next couple days. Again, disproportionately committed by cis men. You never talk about how cis men are the problem. You never even talk about how men are the problem in any of this. And again, I think people would get so defensive. If you had women coming forward and immediately were like, there's a very clear through line here between a lot of the mass shootings and the mass violence that occurs in the United States. A lot of it is from far-right radicalization, but the most common theme is misogyny. People who hate women. That is something universally almost that you can look at towards mass shooters internationally around the world as they constantly talk about feminism, about the vile feminists, about how feminism is destroying Western civilization. That was something that Anders Breivik wrote about. He said that feminism was destroying Western civilization and an influx of the Muslim population was also destroying Europe. Shit like that. It seems to be yet another consistent through line that no one wants to talk about. But if women came forward and said that and said, I think the big problem here is men, what do you think the response would be? Immediately, oh, feminism, misandry, not all men, hashtag not all men, not all men, we don't all do this. It's true, not all men. Some men are wonderful, they're lovely, they're incredible. I mean, you know, yeah, hashtag not all men. But if you despise mass shooters who kill and murder children, then you should have no problem calling this out and being like, well, the overwhelming majority of these shooters seem to be men. Bad men. Terrible men. The really, really evil men. That seems to be a thing that a lot of these mass shooters have in common. So what can we do? If you're not willing to go as far as saying all men shouldn't have guns because they just can't be trusted with them anymore. I mean, you know, they've had their shot, but they ruined it. Okay. Well, then maybe we should actually have a discussion about gun restrictions, about the fact that where this happens for the vast majority and where the most of these tragedies occur seems to be in the United States.
By the way, on Twitter, you would have a lot of people that agree with you. No, there's been a lot of people that have been feeling that way. It's been massive. It's been crazy. Like, I've been seeing, like, the amount of people who are, like, hyper-focused on, like, especially Jews. People really don't like Jews anymore. They really, really don't. Like, I've been seeing, like, and I feel like every time that I feel like it's peaked, it goes again. It gets even more extreme. People go even harder with it. They never have, bro. I mean, there's 109 examples of that. You're right. And Jews.
I don't know, Asmongold. Maybe in your corners of the internet, you're noticing a lot of that. Seems maybe your algorithm might be feeding you the kind of stuff that you want to see, or the kind of links that you've been showing your chat and that you've been putting on your stream. That might get you into some cycles where you're seeing a lot of people who seem to be very anti-Semitic. Weird, strange, bizarre. I have no idea how that happened. But also, you should actually look into the fact that if you're doing far-right radicalization, especially in front of your own fans, and you're talking about this kind of stuff on a regular basis, well, there's going to be a percentage of them who might also be anti-Semitic, right? Or who might also be racist, or who might also just be like, I mean, I've been watching this Asmongold guy, and he talks a lot about anti-white racism, talks a lot about how things have gotten out of control, and how white people are getting fed up with it all. You know, he's talking about different forms of fatigue. Not the conservatives, including Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, have seized on Wednesday's school shooting in Minneapolis and reports about the shooter's identity to push an anti-trans rhetoric and policy. In a Wednesday post shared in response to a shooting at a school that left 2 children dead and 17 other children and adults wounded, Greene described gender dysphoria as a mental illness and urged Congress to pass legislation that would make it a felony to perform sex change surgeries and all forms of medication on minors. Tesla CEO Elon Musk and Conservative Party commentator Benny Johnson also shared posts alleging a pattern regarding instances of violence of trans and non-binary gender identity. These statements are patently false. As Gun Violence Archives noted in 2024, about 0.11% of all known suspects in mass shootings have been trans in the last decade. Trump written on the firearms. Together they don't suggest a cohesive political ideology as much as a fascination with mass violence and hateful memes. Also, there's been people pointing towards a cult online known as 764. I don't know enough about the organization to start talking and doing a deep dive into it, but some of the iconography of this cult was found on some of the weaponry. 764 is basically a neo-Nazi cult that targets children and oftentimes tries to get them to show their dedication to the cult by doing horrifying things like carving the cult symbology in their, like, you know, skin and then uploading videos of it and stuff like that. But there's been a number of mass shooters that have been directly associated with this cult as well, you know, it is basically related to neo-Nazism and online radicalization and that kind of stuff. The other thing was that another article came out, another quote from an article to talk about how the shooter was not identified as trans later in their life. Another allegedly coded section of the manifesto suggested that the shooter regretted transitioning, but felt it was too late to change. Quote, I'm sick of my hair, I want to chop it off, I only keep it because it pretty much is my last shared image of being trans, but I'm tired of being trans, I wish I never brainwashed myself, I can't cut my hair as of now, it would be embarrassing defeat, and it might be a concerning change of character that could get me reported. Again, not something that anyone on the right who wants to be pushing this narrative that they did the shooting because they were trans is pushing. I'll also add more evidence that the Minneapolis shooter had a manifesto that addressed the motive and had praised Hitler as a child, according to friends. So, again, unbelievable amount of evidence that this was yet another person who was radicalized into far-right extremism. I know some people were kind of like, well, it can't be a far-right extremist if they were saying kill Donald Trump. And then it was like, are you saying that Nazis universally love Donald Trump? Ooh, that's a weird corner to paint yourself into. Strange. Yeah. You want to stick with that one? All right. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, own it. Own it. You better own it. The other thing that was going on here, though, is that because of the conflation with the actions of the state of Israel with all Jewish people that is constantly being done by both right-wingers, by both anti-Semitic assholes, by neo-Nazis, and as well by Zionists, liberal Zionists alike, who are consistently saying that if you are to criticize Israel, you must be doing so because you're anti-Semitic. You can't simply criticize Israel as an independent nation, doing war crimes, doing genocide, doing apartheid. In totality, all Jewish people have to be associated with it. Well, there are a lot of neo-Nazis who have bought into that rationale as well. So the same neo-Nazis who might be be in opposition to Donald Trump's strong support of Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump's strong support for the actions of Israel, Donald Trump's strong support for giving Israel billions of dollars and also selling them tons and tons of weaponry, Donald Trump's strong support for annexing Gaza, all that kind of stuff. That could make someone who is a neo-Nazi, who is anti-Semitic, and who directly targets and hates Jewish people to also want to target Donald Trump. Again, that's not a unbelievably complex and difficult leap to make. But I think at the end of the day, regardless of what the motivation was, regardless of what the purpose behind the shooting was, this was a horrifying tragedy that should never have happened. And if you want to take away the fact that, like, we're not going to overnight be able to just shut off, say, the radicalization of individuals online, we're not going to be able to shut off the fact that people can go down far-right rabbit holes, or they can become deeply, deeply racist or anti-Semitic or anything like that, and it doesn't matter what their gender identity is, there's still going to be the possibility that people can be radicalized of all genders, and by the way, of all ethnicities. I know there's been mass shootings perpetrated by black people, mass shootings perpetrated by Latino people, in which in both cases, when they were done by a black Nazi in one case and a Latino Nazi in the other case, the right just didn't know how to process that. They were just like, well, no, they can't be a white supremacist. They're not white. And it's like, but they can absolutely want to uphold white supremacy and yes, be white supremacists. What the fuck are you talking about? No, that guy wasn't a white supremacist. He wasn't. He couldn't have been. He says that he's really into libs of TikTok and higher right check and stuff like that. The guy has a swastika tattooed on his chest. I'm sorry, but I don't really know if there's any other way to frame this. I mean, do you need him to literally say that he loved Hitler? Well, he did. He wrote it down. Here is the statement right there. He wrote that down too. I don't think that's the social media. I don't think that's really a social media history. No, I don't know if we can actually say that this guy was a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi or was indoctrinated into that kind of stuff or that kind of a cult. I don't think we should talk about that. It's like, people are not monoliths, okay? You got to start wrapping your heads around this. At a certain point, you're going to have to realize that, yes, there can be Nazis who are not white. There can be white supremacists who are not white. There can be people who uphold a lot of the racism that you will also hear out of the mouth of a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi who happen to be in the very groups that those same people target on a regular basis. And then they have to reckon with that because, yeah, they might be multiracial. They might have a father or a mother who is Jewish. They might have, someone in their past or in their ancestry that doesn't make them 100% the pure Aryan race and stuff, and then they get their own communities going after them, being like, you lied to us, you said, Jake Shields, that you were 100% white, and then he's like, I never said that, come on people, what's wrong with all of you? Now Zach is saying this: anyone trying to play the blame game when a shooting happens and say which side the shooter was on is a fucking arsler. Read their comments, the manifesto. They're not right or left wing. They're insane. These people transcend politics and operate in the realms of psychosis. Are you gonna delete the video from yesterday that you put up on your main channel? It's got hundreds of thousands of views, in which you're directly disparaging the LGBTQ plus community, that you may be actually inciting violence towards trans people with a video like that, especially leaving it up there for a lot of people to just watch and be like, oh, whoa, holy shit, yeah, Asman is saying that, like, this has a lot to do with far-right radicalization of trans people, that trans people and a lot of queer people apparently are completely fine with advocating for violence. That's what their side does. Their side is totally fine advocating for violence, and then now when it happens, like, this is the real world of consequences. Do you think that maybe that could radicalize, I don't know, some far-right members of your own audience to maybe commit acts of violence towards vulnerable communities, many of whom are already very terrified, by virtue of the fact that there's just a huge amount of bigotry being directed towards them? Or are you just going to leave it up there? Just again, because I feel like none of these people ever face consequences unless someone gets litigious, it seems to be. I'm not sure if any of you remember, but like recently, Tim got successfully sued. We don't know for how much. It was in which the party that was suing Tim Pool, mass shooter, and that happened to be the mass shooter that had posted where Tim Pool was interviewing white supremacists, and then the person whom they had falsely accused of being the mass shooter ended up suing them, and it's through that sometimes that it seems like only through litigation are a lot of these really, really big content creators going to recognize that these kind of dangerous and vile lies that can actually have real world consequences actually should issue or warrant a correction of any kind.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This video wouldn't be at all possible without the financial support of all the people whose names you see on the screen right now. And if you want to unlock secret bonus episodes, content that we can't post anywhere else, or get the videos early before anyone else gets to see them, please go on to patreon.com/theserfs. For as little as $1, you can help support this channel and help make more videos like this possible. Our executive producers are Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Garrett Sandoval, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Richard Boehm, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Tigwick, Trav, and Words Greenwood. And also, it wouldn't be possible without all the names you see on the screen right now. Again, if you want to help produce this content, it's only made possible through the funding of our patrons. Head on down to patreon.com/theserfs